All right. Um,
All right, so welcome back if you're joining us from last lesson, first off. And if you're just joining us now, welcome. Just want before we get started, want to make sure everyone's signed into a Onshape account, preferably an Onshape account with the same email that you registered for these lessons with. And to give everyone a few minutes to take care of that. Yep. If everyone could just message in the chat when they've logged into Onshape. There we go. Seems to be. All right. Looks like that's almost everyone. Oh, you don't see Teams as an option on the menu. Um, it should be under on the left-hand side underneath the shared with me. Under share with me. Let me know if you're still having issues with that. All right. Did you get that sorted out? Just want to make sure before we move on. Okay. So looks like we can continue. So for our objectives for today, we're going to review a little bit of the material from last class, do a brief review. Then we're going to be exploring some new content called constraints. And then hopefully we're going to get introduced and have you guys do some extruding on it. So that.
Oh yeah, and by the way, here's a link to some
Yes.
Onshape keyboard shortcuts in chat. Hold on,
Yep. Those are going to be helpful to learn going forward, just so that you don't have to constantly move your mouse around to click everything. It's much simpler.
yeah. So review for last class. Last class we went over how CAD software is used to design 3D models. Um, there's like all kinds of different CAD software. There's like simple like CAD software more designed for kids, such as Tinkercad, all the way up to like industrial solution like SolidWorks and that kind of thing. And then in most CAD software, a 3D model will start as a two-dimensional sketch. So on like a single plane, you'll just kind of draw out more or less what you want the cross section of a model to be and extrude it out from there. Um, and yeah, there's like all kinds of different shapes to use when making a sketch. Um, so some are more useful in certain situations where a different time you might want to use some other form of that same shape. So for example, the center point, rectangle, and corner rectangle are pretty good examples of a shape where um, they both produce the same shape. However, one of them is more useful in like one situation, and the other is more useful in a different situation.
Yep. So if you check the chat, you'll notice I posted a link to a document. That is going to be our practice activity for today. I'm going to go through that.
Yep. And while you're watching, make sure you just try and remember like a couple things. I I'll probably tell you what's more important, but you should also be able to like say, oh yeah, that looks useful. I could probably use that. So anyway, the first thing we're going to go over today is constraints. Don't worry, it's not as hard as like math class, um, despite the examples I've put on here. But yeah, a constraint, it basically defines a feature in such a way that it cannot move or must be in a position relative to some other feature. So some examples are like a rectangle, but you've said like, oh, uh, this side and this side are the same, or, or or they're constrained to be the same length. So that would force the rectangle to be a square. And then another example would be like a line that's tangent to a circle. It has to be like going right off that circle. It can't like go through the circle. It has to be touching the very edge of the circle in only one point. I will provide some examples on that later on, well, actually very soon, um, of why that might be pretty useful. Um, so now we'll go into Onshape. Um, I'll be creating a document to mess around with constraints in. What should I call this one? Uh, Session 2 constraints. So we'll just be diving right in. I'm going to start by creating a sketch on the front plane. And let's see. Let's start with the horizontal and vertical constraints, and also maybe dive into perpendicular too. So let's say you're trying to draw something like, oh, I'm trying to make a piece of, or I'm trying to model a piece of metal. It's like an L shape, kind of. But wow, I wasn't paying attention when I was making my lines, and now they're like, I don't know, what is this? I can't even tell. Um, so this is a good use for the horizontal and vertical constraints. Um, so say I want this line to be perfectly aligned with the horizontal axis. I could either go up to here, press this button, which sets the line to horizontal, or alternatively, I could just press H, which is the keyboard shortcut for it. I'll do it again down here. Oh, wait, I pressed vertical. um, so now see, these lines are perfectly horizontal. I don't have to do any other work to get them how I want them to be. But then there's the other lines now. Okay, well, this one I can just set vertical with, you guessed it, the vertical button. Looks like this one's also vertical now too, but we're gonna press V just to make sure. Oh, it looks like it wasn't actually. My eyes have deceived me. Um, and this one, yeah, we can just press V to make that one vertical as well. Um, and yeah, now it's like a proper 90-degree angle L. We can find this out to be however we want it to be. Let's go like 1 inch, oh, a bit off from the center, but whatever. 1 inch by 1 inch. Let's make this a 16th of an inch. I like 16th inch. It's pretty nice, gotta say. Um, yeah, 16th inch. So that's a decent size. Um, but then maybe I have like some feature I want to add to this. I want a line that goes off. We're gonna put it here. Um, like, wow, okay, I really messed up there. These lines are supposed to be perpendicular to these ones. So I could select both of them, hit the perpendicular, look, it's fixed. My problems have been solved. Unfortunately, there's no keyboard shortcut for this one that I could find. So you actually have to go click the button each time, but hey, it works. It's pretty helpful. Um, and another important part of that is if I get rid of the horizontal constraint, if I like rotate this line, you can see that this is always perpendicular to it. It doesn't just, it, it's not only when it's horizontal or vertical. Um, and yeah, those are fairly useful, but you may be asking yourself, well, why don't I have to do that normally? Doesn't, or why do I even have to do that in the first place? Doesn't Onshape just automatically, oh, if you draw a line, um, like here, this is automatically horizontal, but that's probably because it's a rectangle. Um, However, if I just draw a line like here, you can see like a like yellowish orange dashed line going through it, and like that, and by the cursor, there's a horizontal line there that says, yeah, it's a horizontal line. Here I can do the same for a vertical line. So why should I need to like go back and define a line as a horizontal line? Well, sometimes that doesn't happen, or sometimes, yeah, you might trying to draw something, you're just trying to go too fast. Whoops, I think I messed up a bit here. I can just go, Okay, this is vertical, this is vertical, this is horizontal, this is horizontal, and you can quickly fix your mistakes. Or sometimes in a super complicated sketch, you might be worried like, oh, if I have like a bunch of lines here, but I don't want this line I'm adding to automatically snap to one of the lines I want to snap to a different one. I'm gonna make a rectangle and make this example a bit easier. So I'll start this line here. Say I want this line to go around here, but I don't want it to actually like attach itself to the top of the rectangle. I can hold the shift key, and that prevents it from like snapping to the rectangle. So I can place it right by the rectangle, but if I zoom in super far, you can see it's actually not attached, which is very useful in a lot of situations. Um, Usually that's for when you have like a more complex sketch though, so you might not run into that problem initially.
And
um
Pierce, it looks like we have a good question from
ooh
how do you remove a constraint?
ah
You
that
want
is
to
a
answer that?
very good question. Yeah. So let's say I was um trying to make a like box that has a slant in it or something. Uh, you'll see exactly what I mean once I'm done. So I, I want this line to be at a 45-degree angle, or well, actually a 135-degree angle, but you get the idea to this line. Um, However, currently this line is stuck as horizontal. I don't want that to be. Um, so I can just kind of select this line and click this, delete. Now I can move that down. However, a probably easier to visualize way is to go over here under the sketch dialog tab, hit show constraints. This you'll be able to see every single constraint in the sketch, which is pretty helpful for trying to figure out like, oh, um, yep, there you go, still there. Which is pretty helpful for trying to figure out like, oh, um, this is probably what's preventing this from working exactly the way I want it to. So you can just, okay, well, I don't want that to be horizontal. I'll just quickly go delete that. It's fixed. So now I have the shape I was trying to get. Um, I hope that answered your question. All right. So next, we'll be moving on to probably one of my favorite constraints because it makes it a lot easier to make like squares and stuff. So I have this rectangle. I want it to be a square. The way we've taught this last class is just okay. Uh, we're gonna make this side like however large we want it to be. This side will just make the same, and if I need to make it smaller or larger, I can just like change what that says. However, that's that's like a lot of work. We're lazy. We don't need to do all that. Instead, we can just select both sides that we want to be the same length, and we can press the equals button to make sure that they're never going to be a different length. So for example, now I can't move that corner. However, if I undo, I can change the height because it's not defined. But I can go back and press the E key for sure if I don't want to go up there and click that button. And they're the same length. They are never going to be a different length. I can change this to 1, they're the same length. I can change it to it's a massive number. I probably won't be able to zoom out fast enough to actually get that in this lesson, but both sides will be the same length. So that's the equals key. It's pretty helpful. You actually use it a lot when you're trying to like make sure things are the same distance from each other. You're trying to draw up a piece of square aluminum tubes. You can put it somewhere in the robot model, bunch of stuff like that. Super helpful. So next we'll be going over coincident. This one's kind of fun. The name might sound a little confusing. You probably don't just go, coincident. That means I want this thing to touch this thing and never not touch that thing. So basically, let's say we have this square here. We're gonna set both of these the same, and then we're gonna put it out like what, 2 inches wide. That sounds good. So I have the square. I can draw a line. Let's just put it over here. Oh, what happened? All right, so I'll draw a line. Let's go from there. And then I also want the line here to here. But whoops, I clicked too early. It doesn't connect. Sure, one way with Onshape you can do this is you can just drag it to the line and it'll automatically go, oh yeah, that's probably where they want that to be. So we'll just automatically put the coincident constraint on it. However, another way you could do this, which might help if there's no like good way to just drag it there, you can click both of them and press the coincident button or the I key, and that will automatically put that point on that line. And actually, if I try 2 lines, I don't think that works, does it? Oh, it does. But yeah, so basically, it just makes the 2 line or the 2 like features for a broader term, I suppose. I'll just take up the exact same space. Like, and yeah, it's pretty helpful. So, say I have this circle. I'm drawing it here. I'm gonna put a radius or a diameter onto 1 inch. That looks about right. I could like move it and stuff, but that's lame. Why should I do that? I could just click these, press the coincident button or I key, and it'll automatically snap to the origin point since I selected the center of the circle and the origin point of the sketch. So next up, we are going to do concentric. So this probably won't be quite as common, but what if I want 2 circles to be perfectly centered around each other? This is useful for like if you have like a big plate and you want a bearing in it, or you just want to make something that, I don't know, earlier, like last class, I was talking about making a pipe. This would be pretty useful for that too. So sure, you could just do that. Oh, whoops! Look, I accidentally clicked off center. That was a genuine accident. I actually didn't mean to do that. But that's a perfect case to introduce this constraint. So I'll select both circles, since these are both these circles I want to be putting concentric relevant to each other. And I can click the concentric button, which has no hotkey, and suddenly they're centered around each other. I don't need to like move them, use the coincident constraint or anything like that. I could freely dimension them both. It does not affect. It does actually. Well, it shouldn't. That was probably just a weird scaling thing down shape does. Um, and yeah, these circles are concentric. I don't know what else to say. It's just very helpful sometimes, you know. And select both of them. So next we'll be going on parallel. Um, okay, so I'm trying to design this really cool mechanism that involves two parallel lines, but that's kind of complicated. So up here I have this plate. I'm just going to fix that point and don't worry about it. I'll explain that later probably. And then I have this other rectangle down here. I'm just gonna set these equal to each other. That should make things a little easier on me. Um, so I want that line to go out there, so I want that one to go out there. I don't know exactly where I want it to attach on here, so I'm just going to draw it like that for now. And this should, in theory, keep these two lines parallel to each other. So it just moves this, and it's in the same orientation as this one the entire time. This is a very useful mechanism to put on robots. I've actually used it before, not in FRC, but it's pretty helpful anyway. But I need these two arms to be parallel for it to work properly. At the moment, that doesn't look very parallel to me. I don't know about you, but if I select both lines and I click the parallel button, boom, now they're parallel. Oh, I need to let's set this to 0.5. 0.5 is a nice number. Let's set this to 1. 1's a nice number. Um, look, they're parallel now. It's a lot easier to like move them and make sure they're in the same spot. I swear those were okay. Anyway, oh, that's why. Um, yeah. So and now see, like, look. Earlier when I was going over the coincident feature, um, remember how I was saying that sometimes you can just drag a line over to where it needs to be? Well, look, I can't do that. It doesn't let the lines connect. There just isn't a way to do that. So this is another good example of when the coincident constraint would be pretty helpful to have. I'm just going to do that on both of these. It shouldn't break the model. Yeah, okay, good, it didn't. And look, now I could move this if I set these lines, let's put them at 3 inches. And look, so now I have a mechanism. This is pretty helpful for like lifting stuff. Like I have something down here. Now it's up there. No problems. Um, so that's the parallel constraint. It's pretty helpful. Um, yeah, and then oh yeah, Sean O. All right.
Okay. Seems Amy's got it.
All right, thank you. Okay, in that case, the mirror function. Yeah, I was actually planning to go over that after constraints, but it can't hurt to do it now. So
It,
say I have a plate of something, I don't know, and I want to have like a circle here and a circle here and a box here, and like some weird thing here. Okay, now I want this to be symmetrical. Well, that's a lot of stuff to just move over there, say, oh yeah, we're gonna have all this be constrained the exact same way. So probably instead, the better way to do it is just go, oh, okay, well, I have all this. I want it to be symmetrical across this line. And look, it's symmetrical. It's that easy. So I'm just gonna go over what I did again because that was kind of fast. Um, gonna get rid of that first. So up here is the mirror tool. It lets you mirror a sketch across a line. It says that you have to select the line first and then select the sketch entities. However, it also works if I just like, okay, I'm gonna select all these and mirror them. But let's do it the way it says to. So we have this line here, and then we want all these to be selected. So look, it just mirrored them right across. It's that easy. And yeah, this is a fairly useful tool for like, oh, I have this part, it has to be symmetrical. So like an intake or something, I need these two rollers to be like the same distance apart from the center line. There's like some other complicated intake geometry I need to work in there. Um, but I don't know exactly how it's going to work. So now I can like move this. As you can see, um, if I move one, it moves the other one. I could like change dimensions. I can set dimensions too, I think. I don't see why I wouldn't be able to. Um, so I can like say, oh, I want entity, all right. I want this to be like 1 inch from the center, 1 inch from the bottom, and I want it to be 1 inch tall. Yeah. Oh, what's not dimensioned? Oh, that would do it. But yeah. So you get the idea. The mirror tool makes stuff symmetrical to stuff that's opposite whatever line it was mirrored on. In this case, since I made a 14-gallon bunch of lines there. But yeah, you get the idea. I'll just get rid of all this now. Okay, so back to constraints. We went over concentric, parallel, tangent. Tangent's fun. So we're going to make, let's have a big circle here, smaller circle here, and these have to have holes in them. So I'm gonna put like a smaller circle in there. Let's say this has to be like 1.5 inches. This one has to be 1/2 inch. Actually, it's a little small. Let's go with 0.75 inches. And I want that. Let's go with 1/4 inch spacing around the edge. Okay. All right. So this works. Now I want to have a like bar or something that connects from the top of here to the top of here, and it's tangent to them. But I don't want to like just go in with a line. Oh, that's about there. There. That looks about right. That looks about right. We're gonna do the same for there. Yeah, yeah. Okay, this looks nice. But that doesn't work. That's kind of bad. Um, so like, yeah, I, I want that to be tangent to that. Well, there's a far easier way to do it. You just select both lines. In this case, the curve. So the circle here and this line. I can select the tangent button or press T, and look, it's tangent. Makes it so much easier, and it looks a lot nicer too. I think it works if they're not touching. Yeah, it does. Um, So like here, look, now I have a 1/4 inch bar going from the top of here to the top of there. Um, I could use the trim tool to get rid of that. And look, this is like, if I have some like arm or something I want, there's like a big bearing here and there's something else here. It has to like rotate or something. I don't know. I'm not creative enough for this. Um, yeah, this is like a good way to make a pretty simple, like lightweight plate like that, where like you don't want the inside here to be like taken up by something. Um, and yeah, this is a pretty like lightweight way of doing things. So, yeah, what else should we do? Midpoints. Midpoints are fun. Weren't they fun? I think they're fun. Bernard, do you think they're fun?
They're so much fun.
Heck yeah. All right, so we're gonna create a big square, set these lines equal to each other. Let's do this. I like 3-inch squares. Do you? Um, so we have this line. Let's just put it around there. That looks about right. Put that there, and let's put that there. I like this. This looks nice. Um, okay, so we've made our model, but oh no, we have to change something. Someone didn't like it. It's not done properly or something. I don't know what they mean. I think this is done perfectly. But we have to set this to vertical. Okay, that looks nice. That looks nice. This to horizontal. Um, and let's, while we're here, set this to, let's go with 1/2 inch. I like 1/2 inch. That's this like 1.5 inch. We could figure that dimension out later. I'm just gonna get rid of that. Okay, so apparently this has to be at the midpoint of that line, but I don't want to just use the built-in on-shape features. What if like the something isn't quite the way? I don't know. I'm sure I could find some reason why I don't want to just do that. Instead, I'll just select this line and this point. I'm like, okay, well, I want this point here to be at the middle of this line. So there's like a small, like, rectangle thing branching off of the bigger square. So we're going to go up here to midpoint, select the midpoint. Um, this is pretty helpful. Apparently, it works on like arcs and stuff too. Um, it's probably more useful on arcs because I don't know how to find the midpoint of an arc. I'm terrible at eyeballing things. Um, and yeah, so we have like this shape. I don't like that. That's supposed to be vertical. Let's press V to make it vertical. Okay, look, this is done now. Probably trim that off, and that's dimension, not trim. That might cause problems. Oh no, that didn't work either. Whatever, it's fine. I could just make Bernard do it, right? Yeah. Um, but yeah. So anyway, midpoint. That, that probably wasn't an amazing example. I'll do another one. Let's say I have this square. We're gonna set that to be a 3-inch square again because I like 3-inch squares. And then we have like this weird triangle here. We want that to go there. This is going to be, let's go with 1 inch. And then we want to make an arc. Let's go with a center point arc because they're pretty easy to make. We just, there we go. So now we want to find the center point of this arc. Uh, it, it looks like it's there, but but like, what if I don't trust that? Or what if I actually didn't put the arc here and I had the arc? Isn't that, wait, yeah. And I put the arc here. It's a pretty big arc, but I don't want to find the midpoint of that. It looks like it's there. I don't know. I don't know if that looks right. Um, my mouse scroll wheels. Okay, there we go. So I want to have like some box. Oh crap! That's There we go. Okay, so I want to have like some box out here. I like the look of that, and I want it to be attached by some line. I don't know. But I want this line to be at the midpoint of this circle. I'm sure there's some reason why I would want that. That makes perfect sense. So I can just go up here, press the midpoint, and bam, it's connected. It's at a midpoint. Actually, while I'm here, I can also press normal. So I have the line and the curve. This makes it stick straight out, like it's coming from the center of the curve without actually me needing to like have the line start at like the center of the curve, go out. So I could just normal, okay, go straight out from the center there. That's actually pretty useful. So it's like, oh, I need like this to branch out from this part of the circle. I don't know exactly where that is, what angle that is, but I just need it to be there. And yeah, it could be pretty useful. Although this example probably doesn't make too much sense because I couldn't just think of any really good example at like 2 a.m. when I wrote half the script. Um, let's see. So, more tools are pretty useful. Let's start with the offset tool. I actually really like this tool. It's pretty helpful, I gotta say. So, let's say, okay, I'm trying to make like a gearbox or something. I need to have some like hole for a bearing here, another one there. Let's go with like one there. And then I want to um, that there, and then put another line from there to there, another line there to there. But then I also probably want to make sure these are tangent. I can do by pressing T. Let's just do that real quick. All these circles, I like circles and nice shapes. Okay, so we have this design. We're gonna make all these circles equal because they all use the same bearings or something. Probably, I don't know. Let's set it to 1.25 inches. That's a useful measurement. And then we want like these ones to be 5 inches away, this to be 2 inches, this one to be 4 inches. I like that. That sounds nice. Actually, while we're here, so this actually looks nicer, we're just gonna put the origin at the midpoint of this. Where's midpoint? There's midpoint. Um, and also, since I really like the black lines because they make it just look so much better, we're just gonna do that. Okay, so now none of this is going to move. We're free to do what we want now. Um, so we have this nice plate here, but it's missing something. The holes for the bearings are just exposed on the edges. It's probably not as much of a big deal for this one, but like for this one, where like almost 180 degrees is exposed, yeah, that's a problem. That's going to come out. This one's probably going to come out too. So is this one. Um, I don't like that. That's kind of lame, gotta say. So what we can do is use the offset tool, here it is, um, to like create a line that is offset from another line. So here, let's say, actually, I'm gonna probably just gonna, all right, so we're actually just gonna select the entire thing since I probably want an offset of the entire thing. Only offset single chain at once. That's lame. Okay, so in that case, we're gonna do this. We're going to offset this 1/4 inch. I like a 1/4 inch. That sounds nice. And then we're gonna offset this. Let's do 1/4 inch too. Yeah, I like that. I like that. 1/4 inch here. 1/4 inch here. And you get the idea. Basically, as we keep doing this, we have these like we have this like 1/4 inch boundary around the entire thing. I should probably set this to be constant to here so that, because that blue line there, it means you can like drag it in and out, but no, this is supposed to be attached to the circle. Should not be any problems here. Um, we're gonna go around doing that for all these. Look, now we have this like circle design. So if I want to extrude this, like just so I could like show exactly what this is supposed to look like. Like, look, um, we have this like nice plate now. There's a hole for all these bearings. Like these bars go in from each one to keep them all together. Um, and yeah, so that is the offset tool. It's very useful for when you're trying to like create like a border around something. It just helps with general sketch design. Um, so yeah, that's useful for like just making stuff. Well, I mean, most of CAD is, but you know what I mean. All right, so now we're going to talk about pattern tools. Patterns are pretty fun. Um, we're going to start by, let's just make a the 5-inch square. That's pretty much just the default I'm going to be using for most of this class probably. And let's say we want there to be a 4x4 grid of circles on it. Let's make them 1-inch circles. Yeah, let's go with 1-inch circles. I think that was the measurement I was using earlier. So oh, I want that to be 1-inch off, another 1-inch off. Actually, we're gonna make those 1/2-inch circles because I like 1/2-inch circles too. So we want to repeat this pattern across the entire square, but we don't want to do it by hand because that takes a lot of effort, and I'd really rather not do that. That's a waste of my time. I don't need to go like, oh, it's a circle, circle. Instead, I could just select the circle and I can hit the pattern tool. Um, this will start creating a pattern of circles. In this case, we want it to be 4 across, and then we're going to drag this down. We want it to be 4 down as well. So now we have some options here. We can like select how far apart we want them to be. We're going to set that to 1-inch. We're going to set that to negative 1 minus 1 0. I don't think that's right. I think I mistyped there to negative 1 inches because it's 1 inch below. Oh yeah, that's a good tip there. So in chat, Bernard said, if you don't want a feature, this is primarily for the 3D features, to actually like be a thing. Like you're trying to extrude something, but you don't want to actually extrude it because you like changed your mind or something. Um, Instead of pressing that check up there, you can press that X. It will get rid of like whatever feature you were trying to make. That's how I canceled the extrusion from earlier. Um, and yeah, it's just a pretty good thing to know in case you start doing something and then change your mind. Oh yeah, I don't want to do that. So that's a pretty good question there. Just felt everyone should know that one. All right, so now back to my grid of holes. So yeah, this up here, this dimension, which is created by the tool, I do not have to create that myself. That defines how far apart these holes are going to be. Um, this dimension down here, that defines how far apart these holes are going to be. This number here, 4x, that says there will be 4 of these holes, and this here means the same thing, just going in that direction. So I have a 4x4 grid. They're all 1 inch apart, and if I want to accept this, I'm satisfied here. Um, by my cursor, there's a small mouse button. It says press the left mouse button to accept, or at least that's what that check on there means. So I just kind of click, or click outside, I guess, and it's done. I have now applied this pattern to the entire square. Um, so if I went to extrude, I'd have a bunch of holes in it. So I could put my like fireworks or something in there. I don't know. A bit late for 4th of July, but you know. So yeah, and if I go back into my sketch, um, like these lines here, um, if you want, you can also mess with this while you're actually creating the pattern. I think if you drag the squares, you can change the angle of it. I think that's how you did it. But if I don't want that to be vertical, I'm like, oh, I want that to be at an angle. I can instead. I'm actually going to just put a line from there to there, so that all these equal to each other. Oh no, it doesn't want to do that. Well, I'll just set this to 1 inch then. Too lazy to find the dimension tool. I'll just there we go. So now I have like a nicer pattern, although it does extend off a bit, so a little, yeah. Uh, there are proper ways to do that. I'm just quickly going over it, so I don't particularly care about extending off the sheet. All right, so that was a linear pattern, but what if I want to make like a big circle of shapes or something? So I'm going to start by another square. I'm going to set this to 5 inches. So I have this small square here. Let me do that. So I have a small square. I'm going to make this a 1/2 inch square. Pretty nice small square. I like it. I want it to be rotated around the entire plate. let's say I want like 7 copies of it. That's a weird number. Seven's yeah. I don't really want to do that by hand. That's pretty lame. Sure, I could probably work out some way with like construction lines and um, but that's like complicated. It's not really efficient. There are better ways to do this. Instead, actually, I should probably select it. Okay. Um, while I'm here, I should also set that to be a certain distance away. Let's go with 1 inch away. Okay. Or actually, does that look nicer? I think that looks nicer. Um, let's create a circular pattern. We are going to go with all these shapes. Okay, that looks nice. So you may notice some similarities to the linear pattern. For example, there's this small square here, which will let me change where the center is, similar to the way that you can change how like the angle of a pattern. And then there's also this here, so I can like change like, oh, it's rotation stuff. Say I only want that to go out to there. I can set this to 180. I have 3 copies of this square. They're all going around. But no, I want that to go all the way around. Oops, someone's translating. And I want 9 of them. So it's 9 of them. But look, why are they so tight together? Why aren't they over here? Well, you just kind of move that line around there, and now they're all evenly spaced. It automatically stops like at where they are evenly spaced. So if you divided 360 degrees divided by 9, you'll get 40, which is the degree of that angle. And since 360 degrees in a circle, that means that this massive angle around here is 320. So you can just always check that if you're not 100% sure, like, oh, that doesn't look right, I should check it. Yeah, so same as with the linear pattern, I'm just going to click to accept it, and now it's defined. Why are these? Oh, it's because I didn't explicitly state that should be at the center, apparently. Okay, so since I want that to be at the center, I am going to use the coincident constraint. As you can see, it's actually really, really helpful. And I could just set that at the center, and now all the lines are black. That means this is fully defined, nothing can move. This is exactly how it's supposed to be. And yeah, I think I like this one quite a bit. So now, since we have half hour left, sounds about good, let's move on to extrusions, or at least properly introducing extrusions. There's a couple different types. The first one we're gonna start out with is just the standard extrude, which has a couple different options. Like we can, like solid, we can create a new part, we can add on to a part, we can remove from a part, we can intersect with a part. Surface stuff is a little more complicated. It's kind of scary sometimes. But we're just going to start off with a solid new. So the very first dialogue, faces and sketch regions to extrude. This is a pretty important thing to know. Um, so when you create a sketch and there's like multiple like areas inside the sketch which are defined by the solid lines, as I talked about last class, not the like dashed construction lines. Um, but when you create a sketch, usually you'll have like several different like regions that you can choose to extrude. Um, by default, it's pretty smart, and it'll say, "Oh, if there's like a hole or what looks like it should be a hole, I'll just kind of assume that's a hole. This is probably what they want." And 9 times out of 10, that's probably what you want. Um, although you'll know if you don't want that. But you could also say, oh well, I don't actually care about that, but I only want this particular region. You can just kind of select that region. Now that's the only part that extrudes. Um, so now you may think, oh, okay, well, I'll just select all of these regions. Hey, why are they different colors? I don't want them to be different colors. What does that mean? Well, if you select a bunch of different regions and they don't touch each other, well, in the real world, um, how often do you see a part and another part and they're not connected, but it's all one thing, it's all solid? You don't ever see that. That's not how like stuff being attached to itself works. Um, so here, since you're trying to create like multiple di- different areas, it's like, oh well, these aren't attached, so it's clearly not the same part. I am going to be smart and I am going to create a part for each one. So at the bottom left of the screen, you can see that it's starting to create a part for each one. If I keep selecting more, it'll keep creating more parts. So I have 7 now. And yeah, if I really want, I could just create a bunch of parts. But, and yeah, most of the time you probably don't want that to be happening. Um, or if you do, I don't know. I'm sure there's plenty of perfectly valid examples for this, honestly. Um, but yeah, so anyway, I don't want to have like 7 or 9 different parts. I think I put 9. Um, instead, I want like one big part that has a bunch of holes in it. If I want, I can get rid of. Actually, I quite like that pattern. Let's go with that. So um, I want these holes to be here. Let's just kind of keep that how it is. I think that sounds nice. Um, so I'm extruding like these 4 sketch regions. There's the like massive square area. There's the like top slightly left square. There's the bottom left square. There's the like bottom right square. And that's what I'm going to extrude. All of that is going to go into part 1. So um, I'm creating one part because there's only one like physical region now. Um, and then now I have to decide like, okay, how far do I want this to be extruded? Um, there's a couple different ways to do this. You can do it blind, so it just goes like straight off the plane that you created it off of. You can use my favorite, which is symmetric, which is basically the exact same thing, but it only extrudes like half of what you put in both directions, which yeah, it just produces the same result except it's centered on the plane you created on. There's also up to next, which is used when you have like other stuff in the part studio, up to face, part, vertex, all that. And there's also through all, although that's more useful for the remove function in my experience. Um, but we're going to go with the symmetric one for now. Um, let's say, how deep do we want this to be? I guess we'll just stick with the 1 inch for now. However, if I wanted this to be like 2 inches, I could set it to 2. And now from that point to that point, or this line is now 2 inches long. So if I press the check button up here to accept this, I have my part now. It has my 6 holes now in it. And if I click on this line in the very bottom right down here, it'll tell me how long this line is, and it's 2 inches. It's exactly what I said. So now, well, actually, speaking of the like 2 inches, um, this tool down here is extremely useful for checking to make sure parts of your model are like set up the way that they're supposed to be. So say I have this square here. I want to check a couple measurements to see how far away it is from this line. So first I am going to select this line, or actually since I already have that one selected, I have to click somewhere else to deselect first. But I will click on that line, and as you can see, it shows me that it's 5 inches. But now I want to see how far away that point is from that line. So I just click that point, and it says that the minimum distance, which is that dashed black line that shows up when I just kind of run my mouse over the like dimension helper tool. It is 0.535 inches, or a more precise number would be 0.53511 inches. I can also click on that line, and I can see, oh look, that is the like outer side of this square is at a 160-degree angle to this line. Does that look right? It's probably that way. And yeah, it's fairly whole. Yeah. See, so those lines that show up there. And if I click on the triangle that's right next to it, I get a lot more information. I can see that the minimum x distance, or well, the minimum overall distance is 0.535 inches. The minimum x distance is 0.535. There's no like y differences, no z differences. And the 5.5 inches, that's the total length of both lines, if I'm not mistaken. So then I also want to say find that line to that line. Shows the same details. I can go in here. Now there's a bunch of other stuff like the like it shows the or yeah, so it's the best way to display this, I guess. Yeah. So the minimum x distance is about half an inch. Y 2 inches because I made this 2 inches thick. The actual minimum distance, so like the closest point between there, is a bit over 2 inches. And yeah, this is like a really good way to just find whatever information you want in the model. So now let's say, okay, well, this part's great and all. I'm actually going to double click on here, and I want this to be a bit thinner, so I'm going to set the depth to 1 inch. Okay, that looks a bit better. But now I want there to be like a circle or something that branches off of here. Well, I want to create a, another sketch that I just click on the face of this model. In fact, when you're creating a sketch, the sketch plane option can be used to say, oh, well, maybe I want it like up here or something. Um, but so yeah, I am going to create a sketch on the front face of this model, and I want to create a circle. I'm going to make it the same radius as like there to these squares. Okay, I think this looks pretty nice. Um, but now I want to extrude this. Does that make sense? I think it makes sense, right? I, I mean, all I want to do is add to this model. I don't want to create like an extra part that's just a circle. So I go up to extrude, and yeah, it looks like on shape agrees. I am creating a 1 inch circular like protrusion from this model. Um, and there's a couple different ways to do this. So yeah, by default, since you're um, trying to draw the sketch off of like this face, uh, it assumes, oh yeah, you probably don't want to create a new part, which you can do, and it'll create a new part. You probably want to add a like section onto an existing part, which if it's not the part that you're like doing it off of, you can go down to merge scope down here. You can select a different part. However, we only have the one part right now, so I can't really show that properly. Um, but then yeah, you can choose like, oh, any sketch faces you want. You can change the direction. In this case, doing that won't really do much of anything. Um, yeah, so I want this to extend out, let's say half an inch. Half an inch sounds nice. Um, and now I have a little bit extending out, just about a half inch, not too hard to see. Um, but then maybe instead of like a small area of the part like going out, maybe I want like a hole or something in my part. So I'll go back to this extrude, and instead of add, I can go over to remove. It'll probably complain about that at first because like, oh, um, that doesn't intersect with anything. There's just nothing there. You're not actually removing anything. If it complains about that, you can press these arrows here to reverse the direction, which I'm not sure what it's doing there. It should remove from this part of the sketch, and if I do it, oh, it doesn't. Why did it not do it? Failed to return a valid part. Okay, let's try this again. So we're going to go in here, going to go to extrude, say remove. Why is it not working? I'm actually not sure. All right, so let's try this again. Let's get rid of that circle. We don't really need it. Let's just draw another one. It doesn't really matter exactly how large it is. But we're trying to remove from this part. Let's say, yeah, let's just go with an inch. So we accept that, and look, there's a big hole in our part now. We can use like, or so if there's like some hole that has to go through like a couple different sketch layers or something like that, this is one of the nice ways to do it. You can also set like exactly how deep it is. There is a better tool for or yeah, there's a better tool to help create like holes for like bolts and screws and stuff, but we're not going over that today. That'll be next session probably. Um, Although I will show you a way to create a bolt, but if you have to follow that, I'll explain it later. But anyway, the final like extrusion part I really want to show today is if we have let's set these tangent. That's a nice what? Oh, coincident. There we go. That was probably the cause of the issue I was having earlier. Is that like some weird? I don't know. But okay, so let's say I only want this part. I want to get rid of everything else. I don't like it. Well, I don't have to make like a big square from there to there. That's unnecessary. Instead, I can just say, okay, I want to extrude this, but I only want it to be where the sketch and the other part intersect. Um, so I only have like this like chunk of whatever because that's like the circle's like area on the other part kind of. I think that's a good way to phrase it. So that's if you need to, I don't know. I don't use that too much, but I also don't create too many super complicated parts anyway. So I'm sure someone can find a nice use for it. Chamfer the center hole. Hold on a second. Oh yeah. This yeah, this is the one I want. We're gonna undo that. Let's say 2 inches. I like 2 inches. We're going to make that a hole. We're going to remove it. This is actually a good time to use through all. Like you don't have to worry about like, oh, how deep do I want the hole to be? You just say through all. It's a hole. It goes through the entire thing. You don't have to think about it. So it's okay. There's that. And then let's say we want it to be chamfered. I want to say it was just select the edge and do that. Oh yeah, that's what it was. Um, that's a little more complicated, but yes, this is nice. Say you're trying to make a hole for a bearing, although if you're doing it, or, yeah, so usually you would probably try to make the hole in the sketch, and then you just chamfer this here, so it makes it a bit easier to like press in the bearing. But I want this. Let's go with doesn't have to be too large. Just go with a 16th of an inch, and now there's like a slight chamfer on the entire hole. So yeah, that's fairly useful. And now back to the script. Hold on. Yeah. So now I'm going to create another part. This one's going to be like a bolt, I guess. Start from the top this time. Select this plane. How large do I want my bolt to be? Let's make this a 1/4 inch bolt. I don't know. I'm too lazy to actually find. Actually, no. Let's make it an inch. It's a thick boy. Okay, so we have this circle. We're gonna go up to the top left, press extrude. How large do we want this to be? Let's make this, well, first make it symmetrical, so it looks nicer. And then let's make it, I don't know, make it a 5-inch bolt. That sounds pretty good to me. Um, it's probably a little, it's probably a bit out of the scope of this lesson to add the actual like grooves around the edge. But let's just go to the top now. Like, oh, I like, since I'm trying to make the robot model look better, I want to put a thing on the top to represent the bolt's head. Um, let's just make this a pretty big one. Let's go with 1.5 inches. That looks about right. Um, Forgot to actually extrude it. Yeah, so now since we're just trying to add a bit on the top, we could do that. This is also, or yeah, this is just a really nice way to add anything on the top. Um, Alternatively, we could create a, like, that area as a sketch and just revolve it. But that's something we'll be going on to next lesson, I think. Yeah, so I have my bolt, and this looks pretty nice, but okay, how am I going to turn this? There's no good way to like turn it. Well, in this case, since the only real way to do that is with hex, I don't care what anyone else says. Hex is clearly the superior form of bolt. Um, we're just going to create a little hex head. Uh, how large do we want this to be? Let's go with 1 inch. It's massive. Yeah, so then since we want to be able to actually turn that, let's not just have it extrude out, let's have it remove. And then we don't want it to go all the way in, so we're just gonna 3/4 of an inch. That sounds pretty good. So that's our bolt now. Its proportions are a little wacky since I just eyeballed most of it, but yeah, that's what it's supposed to be. Um, so that's like a pretty good example into like creating slightly more complex parts. Like, um, it doesn't all have to be in one sketch. You can just like add stuff on top, um, take stuff out if like a couple different sketches like create something you don't want. Um, and yeah, I mean that's just like good way to create parts. This is also very useful for the practice activity. I would like to add, how would you add the threads? That's a little out of the scope of this, and there's only like 3 minutes left, so it's not like we have time right now as it is. I might show you next lesson, but this is a pretty obscure example already. I'm not sure if you're gonna need that. But yeah, so uh, I'd say it's time for the quiz. But everyone else, so which of these tools is the tangent tool?
All right, looks like everyone's agreeing it is B.
Yeah, it is B. All right, what's a good use for the linear pattern tool? Waiting for people to type stuff up.
Mhm.
Does anyone have a good use for the linear pattern tool? No? Okay. Well, the linear pattern tool is good. replicating within parameters for even spacing. Yep, that's a pretty good way of phrasing it. It's pretty good for when you want like this one section of your sketch to be like repeated multiple times across like a larger space. um, and yeah, it can be pretty useful. Like on my first team I was on in freshman year, um, there was this really big aluminum plate we had to have on the robot, but it was like really big. If we had just had the entire plate on there, um, our robot would have been pretty heavy. It would have been a bit of a problem. So we had to like model out a bunch of holes in the plate, so it was actually light enough to not push our robot over the weight limit. Okay, so then how do you create a sketch somewhere other than the X, Y, or Z planes?
Point in center. Good.
Anyone else?
Got 2 answers.
All right, so that's probably the best one so far. Yeah, this is more or less the answer I was going for. You just kind of click on any face you want. I think it has to be flat faces. I don't think like a curved face would work too well. Although there are ways to make a curved sketch, which is a pain. It was fun to learn. But yeah, basically you select the sketch tool and you click on the face or plane you want, and it creates a sketch there. Okay, so what is a way to create a hole in a part after you have already extruded it without going back to the original sketch? Use another extrude with the roof function. Yeah.
Yep.
Uh, yeah, that's pretty much it. All right, so does anyone have any questions or anything that wasn't too clear with, or just anything really you want to know that we went over in today's lesson?
Maybe beat me to it. Let's go into it.
Well, seems like no one has any questions. So just make sure when you're creating your practice activity that you share it with the team. I'll actually go over that again real quick. You go up to the top right. There's this big blue button that says share. You're gonna click on that. Um, it says like who's already shared with. You can go down here, hit teams. If you click in this box, you can, it's called search names. It'll show you what teams you are already a part of. In this case, since I'm trying to share with the Team 4087 Virtual CAD Workshops 2020 team, I am going to click that. Here I'll just click can view, and I want to hit share, and that's about it. It is now shared with all of you. Once Onshape loads, this might take a little. We go in on a teams, Team 4087 Virtual CAD Workshops. And yep, looks like someone else already shared. And yeah, you could view everything that's shared with the team here. How do you make the car one part, and how do you make a space inside the car? So the car as one part, I'll go back in here for now. that would be done more or less the same way as we did the bolt. So if you have like the body of the car, you would click like wherever you wanted the wheels to be on. You'd create the wheels, and then you would extrude them. And instead of creating a new part, you would add them to the part you already made. So let's pretend that um, this is where I want the wheels of my car to be. I can hit sketch. I can make a new sketch. Um,
Someone asked how to make the car one part and make the inside of the car.
yeah, that's what I'm working on. But it's basically like if that's the like side of the car, kind of, I guess. Actually, gonna make those construction lines. We're going to like create a wheel wherever we want that wheel to be. We don't want that wheel to be a construction line, and then we can just like extrude that wheel out. Um, a solid add. We're gonna go that area. That, yeah, looks right. And then we want this to just go a half an inch. I like half an inch. And that'll be merged with part two. So now we have like added like a very simple wheel on the side of our car. And then the space inside the car, as Sean O'Hara said earlier, that would probably be the remove function. Or if you wanted, you could like create a rectangular base and like um, use the extrude function to build up walls around it. So it's like a box, sort of. There's like many different ways to do it. I'm sure you can find at least one that you really like. Um, on that note, I think that's about the only. Yeah, if no one has any more questions, I don't think there's anything else for today. You're all free to leave.
Yep. Still taking any questions if you have them, though.
Yeah, yeah.